Thank you. The committee welcomes Caltex, who made submission number 63. For the Hansard record, could you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear today?
I'm Stephen Gregg, I'm the chairman of Caltex.
Julian, Segal, CEO and Managing Director of Caltex.
Thank you for joining us today, gentlemen. I invite you now to make an opening statement, after which the committee will ask questions. Thank you.
Very much. Deputy Chair, members and Senator, thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. My name is Julian Segal and I'm Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Caltex Australia. Appearing with me today is the Chairman of the Caltex Board, Stephen Gregg. Let me begin by saying Caltex welcomes this inquiry. We directly employ around 5,000 Australians, and since 1980, we have worked with hundreds of small business operators through a franchise model. I acknowledge that there have been serious issues in our franchise network. There were issues that appalled me and show that we failed to understand that some people were prepared to exploit vulnerable workers for their own benefit. We regret that these issues arose and we took appropriate action as soon as they were identified. We are committed to eliminating wage fraud and worker exploitation and supporting impacted workers. That is exactly why we took strong, swift and decisive action to ensure that these issues never occur in any part of the Caltex business. We are now on a course to move our retail sites to full company operation by the end of 2020, but our decision to do that is not related to the issues in the network. In 2015, as part of a total company review, Caltex made the strategic decision to invest in our convenience retail offering. Central to that strategy has been the creation of a core convenience retail business alongside our legacy business of fuels and infrastructure. We subsequently conducted a 2-year review of our retail operations, and in February this year, we announced our decision to transition away from the franchise model in favor of company operation. The process of engaging with franchisees is well advanced, as at today 73% of franchisees have settled on terms and dates for transition. I note that there have been some claims about Caltex's franchise model made before this committee. Over the past 4 decades, we have operated a fair and equitable franchise model. All terms of our model are disclosed to the franchisee before they enter into an agreement with Caltex. Any changes to the model are made in consultation with the National Franchise Council, which represents franchisees. No changes are made to individual agreements. I also understand that there have been claims that Caltex turn a blind eye or ignore wage underpayment. The facts tell a different story. In 2015, following media coverage of wage underpayment in another franchise network, we took our own action to establish a review of the businesses working with Caltex. At the outset, we asked our franchisees for a declaration that they were not engaging in underpayment. We also asked for profit and loss statements to check that they were paying employees in accordance with fair work laws, and audited sites where there appeared to be some anomalies in the information provided. Despite assurances from franchisees, our initial audit results indicated that we could not rely on the written assurances and wage underpayment was in fact taking place. It was enough to indicate to us that there were serious issues to address in our franchisee network. We acted swiftly to commence an audit of all franchisee sites with the aim of stamping out wage underpayment and other serious breaches of our franchise agreements. In addition, we established a whistleblower hotline for franchisee employees so they could come forward and report any wage underpayments. Caltex Australia took this action voluntarily and with regular offers to share our findings with regulators, including the ACCC and the Fair Work Ombudsman. Since we began our audit program, we have audited more than 360 sites, which is more than half of the franchise network, and we have taken actions permitted to us under the code. Serious breaches resulted in termination of franchise agreements. Franchisees who were not willing to participate in an audit chose instead to walk away from their business. And franchisees who made honest mistakes and were willing to remediate, these went on to operate their business. I have always been very clear in saying unlawful behavior will not be tolerated at Caltex, and will continue to act decisively and in line with relevant codes to remove the practice from our own franchise network. We are aware that some former franchisees have made public assertions that the reason workers were underpaid was because the franchise model made it impossible for them to make money. We do not accept this. Equally, there have been claims that Caltex has not acted in good faith with those franchisees. We reject this. In fact, we have been open and transparent throughout the audit process and throughout the transition phase. You have heard claims that our decision to move away from franchising is connected to the discovery of wage underpayment in the network. It is understandable connection, but it's not the case. Franchising has helped grow our business, and it has been good for the franchisees. We have had long partnerships with many of them. We do not believe that the franchise model is broken. Rather, we maintain that franchising can provide individuals with great opportunities and a better chance of success than as a sole operator. However, our view is that there could be some improvements to the overall governance framework for the benefit of franchisors and franchisees. We support the committee's objective. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Is it Segal or Segal?
Segal.
Segal. Thank you. And would you mind sending your opening statement to the Secretariat for the committee to have a copy
Absolutely.
of that? Thank you very
I've got
much.
a hard
Mr.
copy.
Bill, I think we'll give you contacts. I don't think he has a hard copy.
Yeah.
All right, somebody's going to sort it out. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Segal, could I just go to the Fair Work Ombudsman's release of the 5th of March 2018? You have addressed a number of the concerns, and you've very clearly expressed that you're appalled by the behaviours that you found on audit. But if I can just take you through her statement at 5th of March 2018, that the Ombudsman's compliance activity report showed a workplace non-compliance rate of 76% in the Caltex service network. Has sufficient change occurred in the period since March to today to change that cultural practice?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Has something changed?
Has sufficient structural change occurred to prevent such non-compliance in the period between 5th of March 2018, when this was released?
Senator O'Neill, thank you for your question. I would start by pointing out that the report of the Fair Work Ombudsman was based on a very limited number of cases, I think around 25.
Correct.
And only 2 of those were found to be with serious breaches. Having said that, I think the important thing to remember is that we took immediate action as soon as we even thought there was a potential for breaches in our network. And the important thing is that we started by asking our franchisees to confirm that they are complying. We then asked them for profit and loss statements so we can check against our own sites and understand if there is a difference between what we pay and what they pay. At that time, we were still quite naive, believing that that's the only way of defrauding the vulnerable workers. And based on some, in fact, self-admissions of some franchisees they haven't paid, we decided to employ an independent auditor, PKF, to do audits on those particular sites. When we found out that there has been some underpayment, then later on we proceeded with the audit of the whole network, and specifically employed the services of Ernst & Young, who have got specific capabilities in terms of finding out fraud as compared to just mistakes. So we have continued to do that. You have to remember that what we've done originally is focus on what we thought was the more potential sites where fraud is being committed. And indeed, we are seeing now that the rate of failure has been declined. We have audited more than half of our sites. We are finding out that the rate of failure has decreased significantly. In fact, since April this year, we haven't found one failure in our network. So yes, the failure rate has decreased significantly. However, we still are proceeding with auditing the whole network because we want to be totally sure that there is no more underpayment or any other breaches.
So just to be clear, Yes, there were 25 retail fuel outlet sites inspected by Fair Work inspectors, operated by 23 Caltex franchisees in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide, and just 6 of them were found to be compliant. So the non-compliance rate at March was 76%, which is very significant given the sample size. I accept that it's not representative of your entire network, but it was a sample, and the Fair Work Ombudsman's reasonably good at looking at what's going on across the sector. So that is an accurate description of what she found in March. You're saying from April something has materially changed, is that correct?
So I think it's maybe worthwhile, Senator, if I give you a bit of the data of our much more extensive audits. And so we know that out of the total that we've done year to date, we found about 100, in fact, probably 106 or 108 that actually were cleared. Some of them made some honest mistake, but they were willing to repair those mistakes. There were 66 that we found serious breaches, and we terminated the agreement in accordance with our franchise agreement. However, as I mentioned to you before, we tried to focus very much on what were the most likely sites to have these kind of breaches happening. I forgot to mention something very important, that was in the second half of 2016. We decided to put a hotline for whistleblowers. That was very important because there were very courageous people that were willing to put their view forward, even though some of them were threatened. And through these whistleblowers, we've learned some of the methodologies that the fraud was being committed. Because it was not as straightforward, I guess, as in our naivety would have thought. For example, some employees were paid the proper wages, but then they had to pay back the cash. It's very hard to find that kind of fraud.
So
as a result of
this is the same model of on the books, the payment looks like it's been made, as we saw with 7-Eleven, but then there was coercive behaviour applied to the employees, and they were required to repay half of their salary to the franchisee.
There are some cases for sure. So that's why I mentioned to you we needed to appoint a forensic auditor, because we thought by looking at the P&L and comparing it to our sites, we can see the discrepancy. And indeed, we found some. But most of those were made in good faith, actually. They were just mistakes made in good faith. We realized later on, particularly as we started getting calls from whistleblowers, that we needed a more forensic approach, and this is where we employed EY. We've got this kind of capability.
Because the seriously corrupt practices were way below the radar, is that correct?
Sorry?
The seriously corrupt practices were flying way below the radar.
Certainly, from my perspective, Senator, it took me totally and utterly by surprise. I think it's fair to say that Caltex has got a reputation for being a very ethical company, and our number one value, long before I came to the company, is care for the people. We're one of the most safe companies in Australia. I'm talking about the top 10 and even more. We've got an ethical mindset of doing good and taking care of the people. For us to discover something like that was appalling.
So this is a description of what was found in May. You indicated in your response to my first question that in April there was significant change. Is that the case, Mr. Segal?
So what is the case? I'll just repeat to confirm, and that is, it seems we've dealt with the bad apples first, based on whistleblower, based on the first round of audits. We've seen a tremendous drop of failure in audits, and as far as I am aware, and I'm sure that's the case, there have been no additional failed audits since April.
Thank you very much. I might go to Ms. Carney.
Thank you. Do you think there's anything about your franchising model or the business model that maybe made or forced the franchisees to seek other ways to enhance their intake by engaging in this sort of behaviour? Have you had a look at your business model? Like, is it robust? Can they actually make a decent profit from the franchise?
Ms. Carney, thank you very much for your question. And indeed we did. We heard this claim, I'll start by saying the first time we heard this claim from franchisees was only after we actually took action to audit, to find the fraud, and then to act to terminate such agreements. Before that, we haven't heard that. I would like to tell you that personally, I've been meeting franchisees since I came to Caltex. I've been meeting them when I was visiting our own sites. I've been meeting them in franchisee conferences. I've been with them to Beijing. I've been to them with Broome. I've been to them to Queenstown. We discussed many, many issues. Not once did one franchisee took me aside to say, there is a problem with your business model. So I would like to make this point. Moreover, we are very transparent in terms of the agreements that you enter in. There is a very clear disclosure statement that we give the franchisee, and we're obviously happy to table it, that outlines every single thing, every single fact about our franchise agreement. The franchise agreement is very clear. Moreover, when a franchisee comes and wants to discuss with us entering into a contract with us, we ask that franchisee to ask for financial advice, independent financial advice, and independent legal advice. We do not sign the contract on the spot. We ask them to go and get the advice. And even after they sign the agreement, they've got 7 days cooling off period to cancel it. We also we took another step. We employed one of the top independent global consulting firms to independently look at our business model. And clearly the business model is designed solidly to enable a franchisee to draw a salary, to legally pay the wages, and to make a profit. So I'm very confident that the business model is sound. One more item that I'd like to mention, that is, we have in place a safety net program. We do acknowledge that sometimes external circumstances can affect the profitability of a franchisee. For example, a bypass used to be a main road, it's not there anymore. A competitor might open up the road, so the traffic has changed. We have this plan in place that every franchisee is aware of, and every franchisee can put his or her hand up and say, look, I've got a problem, help us. We help in a different ways. We help, for example, by reducing some fees, rental fee or electricity fee. Sometimes we help by, in fact, giving a higher commission on petrol. So there is no reason for a franchisee to use this business model that is solid. It's been checked in every possible way, to use that as an excuse to defraud vulnerable workers.
So, Mr. Segal, the only deduction that we can make from that is that people simply sought to exploit their workforce for their own personal financial gain. The model was sound all the time. Is that what you're saying?
If I can stand there, Senator, yes, you may well be right. We found absolutely no correlation between profitability and fraud. Julian's absolutely right. The business model we've had checked out by independent firms. We've looked at it ourselves from top to bottom. And when we checked that against the fraud, there's no correlation there at all. So we drew the same conclusion that you've just drawn.
So it was greed.
Senator?
Sorry?
It was greed.
So you're telling us none of your franchises were under financial pressure to underpay their wages. It was simply a greed issue by your franchisee.
We can't talk to individual franchisees, but what we do know is the business model stacks up and they can make a good profit as well as paying the proper wages to their staff.
And a wage to themselves.
And a wage to themselves, absolutely.
So, Senator Williams, if I may make a comment?
Sorry?
Yes, Mr.
Could I-
Segal? Yes.
Thank you. I would like maybe by way of example to demonstrate to you the kind of exploitation of vulnerable workers that took place in a particular case, and it's a family web. I call it a web because normally we don't want franchisees to operate more than 3, 4, 5 sites, because we believe these are people that are small business people. They are good with a hands-on approach. So we don't want to have somebody operating 20 or 30 sites. But without our understanding, without our knowledge, there's a particular family that together were operating 43 sites. And out of these 43 sites, I can tell you that we calculated that 15 of these sites specifically have a profitability of about $1.2, $1.3 million just on these 15 sites, after paying the proper wages and after paying a salary to the operator. But when we started looking at wage underpayment in this particular web of 43 sites, 62% of the claims, as you know, we set up a fund to help these vulnerable workers. 62% of the claims were from workers working in this web of 43 sites. We paid out $2.5 million, which is almost 50% of what we pay year to date, to workers working in those particular sites. So clearly there is no relationship between profitability of a site and underpayment.
So you're saying it was a cultural business practice that was determined and exploitation was simply a part of that?
That's certainly, I think, my view.
There's
Ms.
one.
Carney.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. There is one example given in this. I take it you've read the submissions.
Yes, yes.
From the ACA. They go into great detail about the business model and how difficult it was to manage. They say prior to 2010, the shop sale fee was 5%. However, in 2010, Caltex increased the shop sale fee to 12%, and this had a devastating impact on franchisees' profitability. Franchisees had no rights of negotiation when exercising options or entering into a new SFA. And then it goes on to say all other costs other than wages were fixed, which left them no option but to continue to enter into suboptimal agreements with employees. So,
Thank you for your question. Let me make it very clear that no agreement has ever been unilaterally changed by Caltex. The agreements that we have signed, first of all, it's important to remember they've been approved by the National Franchisee Council that represents the franchisees, not us. There have been really two changes to the franchise agreement. One was in 2006, that's before I came, and one in 2015. The 2015 change was all about, in fact, a detail, which was the calculator, which enables the franchisee to have a better understanding of fees such as electricity, gas, this kind of utilities, and enable them actually to get better pay from Caltex, recognizing their higher expenses. So that was actually done because we listened to our franchisees, and it was done in connection, together with the franchisees. Not one franchisee agreement has unilaterally been changed by us. So that's the reality.
okay, but so are you saying that this is not true, that statement, about the sales fee, shop sale fee increasing more than double?
That's not correct.
Okay, thank you. Chair?
Senator Cap?
Yes, thank you. And if I could just go to the ACA lawyers' submission at point number 13, they make the comment that all former franchisees are migrants from the Indian subcontinent or the Middle East. Is that correct?
Senator, I certainly can't answer this question. We certainly don't appoint franchisee based on the country of origin. So
I'm not asking that question. I'm asking whether, as a matter of fact, all of the former franchisees are migrants from the Indian subcontinent or the Middle East.
I'm happy, if it's okay, I'm happy to take this on notice and come back to you. I've got I don't know that they are from the continent or from...
You're the CEO, I think,
Yeah.
of the Australian business?
So, Senator, all that I'm saying is I didn't put that lens onto the issue. I didn't put the lens of a country of origin.
Sure, but would I be incorrect in saying that the vast majority of the franchisees, to your knowledge, are migrants from the Indian subcontinent or the Middle East?
Senator, we have not discussed this as an issue. It didn't occur to me that's an issue that has got any implication on the...
Well, it's in the submission from the ACA lawyers, this statement. I'm just asking you about it.
Well, I don't see the connection.
You don't see the connection. Well, then they go on to say that in their submission that, and this may go to the point you were making about the 43 sites, the 43 sites operated by that particular family, was that a family of Middle Eastern or from the Indian subcontinent?
It was the Rana family, so I assume by the name that it would have been from the subcontinent.
Okay. And the ACA's submission says it's natural that once members of a community have established a presence within a franchise, newcomers will also join that franchise in order to establish a business. Most former franchisees ran their businesses through their immediate and extended family. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I don't have this kind of information. As I explained, we didn't look at the issue as an issue of country of origin. We looked at the issue of what's been the behaviour, which is totally unacceptable to us, and I think to any Australian, to take advantage of vulnerable workers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Senator, if I may have a go at that, it doesn't matter where they come from, whether they are from Middle Eastern or the subcontinent or Australia, they have to comply with the law, and they know that. And so whether they run it through their family, the extended family, through other immigrants, it doesn't really make any difference.
Sure. Okay, and I agree with that. If it is the case that all former franchisees are migrants from the Indian subcontinent or the Middle East, it's open to a reasonable person to conclude that that was a part of a strategy of the company.
Senator, can you clarify what the strategy was?
To ensure that all franchisees were from a particular...
Why would that be our strategy?
I'm not asking that why.
Senator, I reject that assertion. I reject that assertion strongly.
Okay. But we have the fact that, well, you'll come back to me and establish whether that's the case, but...
I reject the assertion that we have taken into consideration the country of origin of any of our franchisee in our decision making. What we have done, and that's for everybody to see, is engage into very stringent audits done by independent auditors. And what we found was that some franchisees, regardless of their country of origin, have committed significant fraud, they breached the agreement, and it is our duty to terminate those agreements and stamp that behaviour, regardless of their country of origin.
Yeah, and furthermore, I might just add that notwithstanding where they came from, a lot of them have also been model citizens and model franchisees for a long time. So...
until they weren't.
Look, and I do not condone wage theft or by anybody whatsoever, and that's not my question.
Right.
That's not the inference I'm making. What I'm asking about is the factual situation. Is it the case that, as ACA have said, as to the origin of all of the franchisees, and I'll await your response on whether that's the case, whether that was 100% or 90%. And I would be interested in further explanation if that is the case, and you do find, Mr. Segal, that is the case. I'd be interested in your explanation as to how that came about.
Senator, I don't think, certainly I'll provide as requested information.
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't think there is need for any explanation from my perspective. There could be 90, there could be 100. Let me state again clearly for the committee, and that is Caltex has not looked at the country of origin in any shape or form as part of the considerations of us terminating agreements.
And I'm very much in favour of diversity. I applaud diversity and tolerance. I'm just interested in the curious fact that is where the odds of that happening are low.
So I'll take it. Senator, it would help me if I understood exactly what you're trying to ask here. Is you suggesting that it's a strategy on our part, or are you suggesting that...
Firstly, I'm asking whether, I've asked this about 3 times, I'm asking whether the statement by the ACA in their submission, point 13, is correct. That's the first point, and Mr. Segal, you've taken that on notice.
I did.
Yes. If you come back to me and you established for me that it is correct, that 100% of the franchisees are from that origin, I'm interested in an explanation for that.
So just so I'm clear, are you saying 100% of our franchisees are of that type, or are you saying?
I'm not saying this. I'm not
I'm asking what
alleging
you're trying to ask. Are you asking, are 100% of our franchisees of Indian or subcontinent? Is that the question?
That's the assertion in the
Migrant,
ACA.
this is
Okay,
the
I just want to be
ACA.
clear on that.
That's the assertion that's in the submission.
I'm simply repeating an
That's
assertion in the ACA lawyers' submission.
Okay, that's fine.
Point number 13.
With your permission, Deputy Chair,
Yes,
to ask the
Mr.
question.
Segal.
To me, it's a very important point, and that is, there's an assertion that Senator Catter is making here.
I've made no assertion.
Well, you're asking for an explanation, Senator.
Is it a fact?
It's a fact,
No,
and
the
if
fact
it
is-
is a fact, why is it the case?
So,
I'm not asserting.
so this,
I did say that it would be a reasonable person could make a conclusion, if it is the case, that it was a deliberate strategy on the part of
so
the
I
company.
can give you an answer to that.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. I can give you the answer now. That has not been a consideration. That has not been a strategy. So you have to find another reason. If that's the case, you have to find a reason why it happened that way. But it was
No,
not Caltex's
you'll
strategy.
have to find the reason, because I'm asking you the question.
No, the reason is because those particular individuals have committed fraud. Now, if you want to take a blanket approach and say it's because they are from the subcontinent or
No,
from...
I have never suggested that, Mr. Segal. I'm simply asking about this particular accusation in the submission from the
Okay,
ACA.
so
lawyers.
again, I'll assert that we have not made our decision in any time, in any shape, in any point based on country of origin.
Mr. Segal, you would be aware of the public conversation around the more likely opportunity to exploit a student on a visa from another country, or somebody who might be from another country who was perhaps less informed about Australia's industrial relations law, and that this has become, in some part, a favoured business model for some businesses, some business owners, to employ people with a likely lesser knowledge of their rights. So my question is, could you, if you can provide it now, if not on notice, could you give me an indication of the number of terminations that you've undertaken and details of the country of origin of those people who have received those terminations, just so we get a lie of the land?
So, thank you, Senator. Look, as I mentioned, the number that I'm pretty confident is correct. We terminated because of breaches 66 agreements. There were a number of franchisees that actually chose not to undertake an audit, and there were about, I think, 100 or 96 of those, and 108 or 106 we have cleared. Not necessarily because they didn't make mistakes, but they were of a nature of what we call an honest mistake, and they were willing to correct the mistake. Now, in terms of the country of origin, absolutely, I'm happy to provide that information. I think...
And if you can, provide details of the employees who I hope have now been recompensed for their underpayment by your scheme, and what country of origin they were from, just so we get a profile of the workforce that we're talking about.
Happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good plan.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Just a short comment. I really think it's important to stress that every new franchisee coming to the Caltex network gets training in terms of their obligations to their workers. They get training about the laws applicable to the Work Act. Moreover, in the franchise agreement, the Caltex franchise agreement, there are direct links to, for example, the Fair Work Ombudsman. We provide them with videos and we provide them with refreshers.
So, Mr. Segal, I used to be a teacher in my former life, and let me tell you, there can be a very big gap between the delivery of the program and the reception of the material. So the program might exist, but whether people are operating it, there can be a very big gap between those two things.
Thank you.
Clearly, that was the case.
Thank you.
Senator Williams.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presence. So, Mr. Gregg, you're saying that your franchise model is a good model, it's worked well, and your franchisees should have made good profits.
It's been like that for 35 years, Senator.
Okay, good model. And so the way you see your franchise system, your contracts, your conditions, etc., there should not have been any pressure put on your franchisees to underpay their workers in order to remain viable.
There shouldn't have been, and if there was, as Julian quite rightly said, there's the mechanism for them to approach us and ask for assistance, and we can help with that. One has to understand that it's in our interests that they are successful. We want our franchisees to be successful, because if they're not successful, it reflects on us. So it's not in our interest to put a model in place that they can't make money on and be a success on. It's
That's
just not
a common line we've had from all the franchisors we've spoken to, Mr. Gregg, that they want their franchisees to be successful. However, we do know cases where when the franchisee goes broke, the franchisor takes the facility back and sells it again and again, some even churning them, and every time they sell it again, they're making some good money. But that's an issue to argue later. But talking about your franchise model, I'm going to take you to submission number 162. Don't know who it's from, fair bit blacked out. I'm an ex-Caltex franchisee who was managing Caltex service stations at wherever. I managed the site from 2007 until last year. The gross profit of my store dropped from close to $55,000 per month to close to $30,000 per month from 2010 onwards. This drop in store profit was not due to drop in sales or drop in profit at company levels. The drop was purely because Caltex management transferred profits from franchisee books to management books. How this drastic change happened? 1. Caltex management changed the fuel from direct purchase to commission. Is that correct?
That was in 2006. So,
2006 you changed it?
So what I understand, Senator, is that the franchisees
You
used
did change it from direct purchase to commission your fuel, correct?
correct.
2, Caltex management changed royalty model to rent plus royalty model. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Caltex management changed royalty model to rent plus royalty model.
I'll have to take this on notice that, and come back to you. I mean, Senator, if we're going to go through the details, I don't have all the details in my mind, but I'm happy to come back to you on that.
Well, I thought these might have been basic changes of your franchise modelling you changed. I thought you would have been aware of them, either you or Mr. Gregg. Am I thinking wrong?
Why don't we come back to you if they have specific questions?
Okay,
we'd
the
be very happy
third
to
point
help.
the person makes is Caltex management through their centralised logistics purchase squeezed the gross profit margins on the convenience items sold in the store. Now,
So can I, so
go on.
I would like, Senator, to address this issue of the centralized purchasing system, if I may.
Yes. The centralised purchasing system.
Yeah.
So, and we have heard in our evidence that it was up to $40, I understand, for the purchase of a Coke, a box of Coke, for distribution and sale through the Caltex stores, and the franchisees were indicating that they could purchase the same product down the street for $22 or $24, and that's a similar thing that's been discussed about milk in other contexts. So that's what you're going to talk about now.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to point out, first of all, that the option to participate in the centralized buying system is just that, an option. Every franchisee has got the option to opt in or opt out. The fact is that quite a few franchisees in some areas where we do not have the capability to supply have asked us to consider expanding our service to those areas. That would point out to me that actually it is a good system. The example that you gave me about buying Coke cheaper at the supermarket for $22 or $24 is simply incorrect. It's not a true story, and you can't buy it for that. But I think more importantly, to pick up one item out of a basket of a few hundred items and say, I can buy that one cheaper, of course, you can always do that. There are promotions. The important thing is to look at the total basket and say, is the total basket advantageous to the employee? And the answer is absolutely yes. The alternative for the franchisee is to actually contact hundreds of suppliers, hold stock. Dealing with us, he's getting the ability to pay 17 days. Delivery is 3 times a week. So he's saving money, he's saving cash, and he's getting the convenience of three times a week delivery. So I would say this is an example that is not pointing to the central buying system being bad. On the contrary, it's an example of how people misrepresent this central buying system.
Mr. Gregg, looking at your average Caltex franchisee, what will our gross profit need to be per month to be viable?
Oh, I don't know that. I'll ask you.
So, Senator, every site is different. There's big differences between the sites. Some of them are very big, some of them are very small, some of them have got the possibility to offer more products than the others. So there is no one number.
Well, this submission says very briefly about how the Caltex franchise model was not profitable. I'll give you a few points. Gross profit of all Caltex sites is available to Caltex management. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Gross profit of all Caltex sites is available to Caltex management.
Doesn't make much sense, Senator, because the franchisee is running the shop. They are setting the prices, they are making the profit on the shop, so how can all gross margin be available to Caltex?
Do you take a royalty from the gross sales of each franchise?
We take a royalty on this, small royalty on the sales of the sales in the shop.
On the what? Sales in the shop?
Yeah.
Which includes fuel and everything?
No?
Okay. Well, this person's claiming, and the submission's up there for everyone to see on the website, got to be 45,000 or less a month, then you're not viable. The calculation statement is very simple. Wage only expense on these stores is close to 25,000 a month. Electricity bill 4,000 to 6,000. Royalty to Caltex 5% of shop sales 5,000 to 7,000 a month. Merchant fee expenses were between 3,000 to 5,000 a month. Rent to the store varied and was between 3,000 and 15,000 a month. So this person's saying, under the costs to Caltex, commissions, royalties, rents, you name it, then some of your franchisees were simply not financially viable.
Thank you, Senator. I don't know this particular example. However, I can say is that we ask an independent global consulting firm to check not one site, but to check all of our sites. There's no question there will be one site here and one site there that won't be profitable for a number of reasons, and we know that. But in aggregate, the business model allows a franchisee to pay his own salary, to pay legal wages, and to make a profit. Yes, there's a possibility, of course, that a site that was profitable is not profitable, typically because of external factors. And this is what that franchisee, whoever it was, absolutely knows he can put his hand up and ask for help. So there is no need to go and underpay wages when you've got a clear mechanism to get assistance. I think this is very clear.
Can I ask a clarifying question there, Senator?
Yeah, please.
You indicated in your submission the experience, not only just finding out about from whistleblowers about wage fraud, which you've put on the record, but that franchisees operating sites that have become unprofitable were, in some cases, receiving profitability assistance.
Yeah.
And a small proportion of franchisees whose sites had become unprofitable had not sought and were not receiving assistance.
Well,
Do you have an explanation for, given that option being there, what was the reason for them not seeking assistance? Is it because they didn't, would it affect their on-selling of their business? What was the rationale given?
You'd have to ask them.
so,
Well, I'm hoping that you might have had conversations with them and be able to shed some light on it.
I understand your question. Again, I don't know the particular circumstances of each of those, but I'm happy to take this on notice and come back to you.
Thank you very much. And the other thing you identified was that unprofitability at a number of sites was caused by the franchisees having paid too large an assignment fee to the original franchisee of the site, with the assignment fees significantly exceeding on a pro rata basis the initial franchise fee paid by the original franchisee. So let's just get a bit of evidence on the record about what was going on within the model and the profit taking that was being apparently undertaken as people sold on.
You're talking about assignment of sites from one franchisee to another?
Yes.
I think I would like to start by giving you a fact, which is only 4% of our total sites in a year will be assignments. So it's a very small part of our business. Under the oil code, we believe that we had very little ability to actually deny an independent business person selling their business to another business person. In that context, Senator, it's important for me to mention that the relationship between Caltex and its franchisees has always been very clear, that there are two independent businesses respecting each other's independence. And as such, a franchisee had total control over their operation and financial aspects of their business. One of those aspects is clearly the ability as a business entity, independent business entity, to sell the business to somebody else. We believe that under the oil code, we didn't have the grounds to object on that basis. One of the things that we have learned, Senator, in this process, that we need to tighten that filtering and exercise more force in the process of permitting a franchisee to assign.
Because when people purchase and they pay too much, that sets up a system of failure for that business that impacts on you. Is that correct?
So I think it's interesting. It's an interesting question from the point of view that there is no actual connection between the profitability of the site, the profitability per se of the site, and the assignment fee. But clearly, I think what you're referring to, the person that made an investment, he'd like to see a certain return. There was no impact. So again, I'm stressing, there was no impact of the assignment fee on the profitability. The site could have been very profitable and certainly afford to pay legal wages. But somebody would have said, well, I paid so much, I'd like to take some more. So again, it's a matter of the culture. But I think, as I mentioned to you, Senator, one of the lessons that we did learn.
Can I continue my question?
Yep, thank you. Back to you, Senator.
Now, I want to go on to the line of question, if we could please, Chair. Mr. Gregg, take us through the profit Caltex makes out of franchisee. Caltex own the premises, right?
We either own or lease
them,
the site.
You own the premises and you lease it to the franchisee.
Well, or we lease the site.
Or you lease the site, right?
Yep.
You make profit out of the fuel you provide to the franchisee.
We do. We charge a, well, we
Does Caltex
charge a
A margin.
margin, yes.
Well, is it a case now the franchisees are on just a commission of the fuel they sell, 2.7 cents a litre or something?
That's in the range of 2 to 3 cents a litre.
That's what?
A range of 2 to 3 cents a litre.
2 to 3 cents a litre, they get profit.
That's the commission they get, Senator.
Commission. Not a lot, is it? Now,
I would like to stress that.
hang on.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ask a series of questions. So far, I'm getting bloody nowhere. Does Caltex provide all the stock in the store?
Not necessarily, only the choice of the franchisee. And he can...
The franchisee does not have to buy
No.
through Caltex?
No, that's the whole point, Senator. They can go through central
Well, I'm just
prices or
asking
not.
questions. I'm
or
trying to
not.
get a picture of the whole
Yeah,
program.
their choice.
So they can buy wherever they like
Yeah.
to stock their shop.
Yep.
Moreover, Senator, they can price it the way they want.
What other charges do Caltex charge their franchisee?
Caltex charges...
You have a total agreement charge, is that correct?
We've got a charge, in broad terms, we've got a rental charge.
You got an occupation fee, have you?
That's what it is, yeah, an occupation fee. And we
Run
charge...
us through them. So you make money out of the fuel. you make money out of the site, you've got an occupation fee. Go on.
Those are the main components.
That about the lot, is it?
Sorry, Senator?
Is that? I'm trying to get some idea how much money Caltex, or how you get your profit out of your franchisee by providing the fuel and giving them 2 to 3 cents commission, by having an occupation fee. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How much is the average occupation fee?
Senator, I don't know it off the top of my head. I'm happy to take it on notice and come back to you. May I explain one thing? The way the franchise agreement works, the franchisee takes care of the shop, Caltex takes care of the fuel. So you've got the forecourt, which is the Caltex domain, and you've got the shop, which is the domain of the franchisee. We provide the site, we provide the brand, when we take the risk on the price of the fuel, and we take the risk on the volume of the fuel. So,
Okay.
that's really the main income stream for Caltex.
Well, I'll finish flogging that dead horse. We'll go to something else. You're saying you've solved 73% of your franchisees when you're taking them back. 73% have gone, right?
Sorry, they haven't
You've come to an agreement with them to
got an
exit.
agreement, yes.
You're taking it back. So 27% have not been settled as far as you taking your service stations back. How many service stations do you have in Australia?
We've got about 750.
About 750, or 10% 75, 20% 150. You've probably got about 200 you're still in disagreement with, is that correct?
We are not in disagreement with anyone, Senator.
Well, you haven't settled an settled it. You haven't formed an exit plan from us yet. Let's say about 200 sites.
So, can I correct just one thing,
Please
Senator?
do.
Not all the sites are franchise operated. Quite a few of the sites have been Caltex operated, so the number is smaller than 200.
Okay, how many have you still yet to settle of an exit plan for the franchisee to be out the door and you take over? How many have you got to do yet?
Can I check? I think it's about 100, in the region of 100.
Okay. When you went into the franchisee and said, we've found out you're not paying the proper award wages, you've breached Fair Work Australia, the law, etc., and you've shut them down, you've taken it back. Is that true? You've done that?
Those franchisees that were given notice of the breaches, given the opportunity to make good of the breaches, and they haven't, we terminated the agreements.
Did you prove to them that they had not been paying the correct wage?
Yes, that was done on the basis of an independent audit, Senator.
And so how did that independent authority prove to the franchisee that they've been underpaying their staff?
Senator, the audit was done by an independent, 2 independent auditors, and
We're flogging another dead horse now.
yeah.
We know very well that you shut them down or to give them notice to get out because they weren't paying the right wage. You had 1 or 2 independent authorities do that. How did they prove to that franchisee that they were not paying the right wage? Because I'm suspicious. I think you've used anything you can to shut down a franchisee, and I think you've had a situation where franchisees have been shut down when they haven't been paying the wrong wages, and they've never been proved that they had been paying the wrong wages to lose their franchise. That's the point I'm getting at.
I understand, Senator. The 2 issues are totally unconnected. I can understand because of the timing of the announcement that we made, where we'll make that connection, but this is not the case. It's simply not the case. We have been going through a strategic review that I think is very understandable. We are running in an industry that is declining. Electrical vehicles are coming upon us. We know that fuel keep on declining. We had to put our mind to how do we deal with it on behalf of our employees, our shareholders, our communities that we support. And we came to the conclusion that one option for us is to create a retail convenience business new for Australia, a new concept. Some of you maybe have seen the concept that we've been rolling out. And we came to the conclusion that to run a much different retail option than what we ran before, we can only do successfully by taking ownership or operation of the sites.
Mr. Gregg, did Caltex, the company Caltex, do well out of your franchise system? Did you make good profit?
We've had a very good relationship and we've done well, as have they, for a 35-year period, yes.
Good, so you done well and the franchisee did well and all's been honky-dory?
Yes, it has, but just to help you out here, that's how it's been. But we've changed our strategy, as Julian has rightly said. Over the last few years, we've gone through an exhaustive internal process of strategic thinking, and we're now moving to a different model. The two are not related.
Why are you changing it if it's been so successful for so long?
Senator, as I'm...
Striving for more profit?
So if I may explain, Caltex has been in Australia for over 100 years. We've been an Australian company for over 100 years, providing employment to thousands of employees. And Caltex, therefore, I think has got an obligation to its shareholders, to the Australian people, to keep on existing for another 100 years. If we
we're getting somewhere.
If we sit and we do nothing and we rely
So it's
just
going to return more dividend to your shareholders?
Now, what I'm saying to you is that we've got obligation to our shareholders, to our employees.
That's in the Corporations Act. That's
Sorry?
right. That's part of the Corporations Act. You have an obligation to your shareholders, yes.
Well, of course, we do. So we do
But
to the employees.
My point is this.
Yeah.
You've had a very good system going for a long time. Caltex making good money. The franchisees are making good money. I'm asking a question. I'm looking for an answer. Why are you kicking the franchisees out and taking it back yourself? Is it because you're going to make more profit and more dividends to your shareholders?
So may I explain, Senator?
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Let me start with where we've been, and that is we operate in an industry that is slowly going and decreasing in terms of volumes. It's not sustainable business in the long term. So as a responsible Australian company, we had to adjust our strategy to create a growth platform. And we came to the conclusion that such an opportunity for us is to bring to Australia a new convenience offering. Convenience offering you can see in the UK, in Japan, in Germany, in the USA. That offering is very different. If you go to one of our foodie sites that we've been rolling out since the beginning of 2017, you can see it's totally different. It requires standard services and standard products. They are all fresh, made today, gone today. It requires a very sophisticated supply chain, very different to the one that we used to have. It requires agility and innovation. We came to the conclusion that the only way for us to be successful in rolling out this strategy is to operate these sites. This is a decision that actually comes at a high cost for us. There is a lot of cost involved in taking over an operation. There is a lot of cost involved in setting up the new supply chain. And we market is absolutely well informed about that. It's not an easy task for us to do, but it's for the future of the company.
Well, I'm well aware it costs you a lot of money to take it over and take it back to how you want to put it in, but also it costs the franchisees a lot of money to get into it in the first place, and I question whether they're going to be compensated properly to get out of it. Because I know we've got a case here, and I hope you follow on with this chair from ACA Lawyers, where they represent a lot of franchisees, 25 and about 68 outlets, where they say, since terminating our clients' respective franchise agreements and taking possession of our associated franchise sites, Caltex has not paid compensation to any of our clients, despite many of them attempting to mediate with Caltex pursuant to the Oil Code of Conduct, the Oil Code. So clearly there's some problems here about settling this whole dispute when it comes to winding up your franchisees. I'll leave it to you, Chair.
Did you want to respond to that,
Yeah,
Mr.
sure.
Segal?
I really think it's important, Senator, to remember that what we have done is made an offer to our franchisees to terminate the agreement prior to the original date. It's an offer. Nobody is obliged to accept it, and some people haven't accepted it, and that's okay. What we have done is go with an offer that we thought might be suitable, and the way we've done it is to have discussion one-on-one with the franchisee to fully understand the particular situation of a franchisee, and we have adjusted offers. Maybe it's worthwhile giving you an idea of what's involved. So for a franchisee whose agreement expires beyond 2020, which is the day that we'd like to operate most of our sites, the minimum payment is $100,000, some of them over $1 million. So the discussion that we had, now we're over 300, probably over 350 franchisees, have been useful, have been constructive. We talked about the payment, we talked about the timing, we talked about how we're going to effect the handover, we talked about employment of the employees working for the franchisee. I'd like to make a comment, and that is, over the last 2 years during this transition times, we employed 2,300 new employees in our retail business, most of them ex-franchisee employees. We put in 80,000 training hours into our new employees. That certainly when I talk to them, and it's anecdotal of course, they are delighted to work for Caltex. They enjoy the care that they are getting, they enjoy the training they are getting. They certainly
They probably enjoy getting their fair wages too.
and also a career possibility. So we went from 3,000 employees 2 years ago to 5,300 employees. That's not an easy process, but I think we handle it with extreme care.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just add there, you're saying you've had a good franchise system, a good model, everything. When you met Mr Segal with Fair Work Ombudsman Natalie James, there is little room for doubt that the Fair Work Ombudsman report would be a shocker. The regulator's view was that Caltex was presiding over a non-compliant and unsustainable operating model.
So, Senator, I think I made the point that the Fair Work Ombudsman report was based on 24 audits. 23 of those were minor breaches. Only 2 of them were major breaches. So that's what the report is all about. I would like to also make the point that we started our own inquiry into the possibility of breaches in our own network in September 2015, as soon as we read about another network problems. So we said, okay, let's quickly see if there's a problem with us. Soon after that, by November, certainly by November 2015, we reported to the Fair Work Ombudsman about what's going on in our network and the action that we are taking. We continue to report our audit results to the Fair Work Ombudsman on an ongoing basis. And personally, in fact, I requested a meeting with the Fair Work Ombudsman. I'll just note that it took 12 months before the Fair Work Ombudsman accepted a meeting with me.
So the decision to corporatise the new business, or the new, which is more convenience store based, I understand, is that right? You're moving away from fuel to sort of a convenience business, no?
So thank you for your question. The concept is one of having both the new concept convenience and fuel on our sites. Having said that, we have opened a few sites on the high street that sell no petrol. But the model is very much similar to the UK model, where you do have the fuel, but also a totally different convenience offering.
And that's going to be, you're going to own that. That's going to be a corporate model.
So we operate,
Caltex.
we own or lease the sites anyway.
Yes.
But the difference is that we are going to operate it.
Yes, so you're moving away from the franchise model altogether.
Yeah.
And you're explaining to us that that's not because you thought the franchise model was unviable.
That's correct.
It's just because...
It's a good question. Thank you very much. And what it is, if you see one of our new convenience offering, is totally different to a Star Mart. So a foodery is very different to a Star Mart. You go into a Star Mart and you are met with fresh food that has been prepared that morning and it will leave the shop that afternoon. That creates a lot of difficulty in terms of making sure that the same quality, the customer will expect to have the same quality across the national network. That's not easy to do, particularly in a country like Australia that has got such huge geographical area. So for us to be able, it's critically important, of course, as you know, for the customer to trust that wherever foodery they go, whichever Caltex site they go, they get the same service, the same standard. It's impossible at this stage, we came to the conclusion, it's impossible at this stage for us to deliver this kind of level of service and standardization and supply chain agility without us operating it.
Senator Kesha, please.
Yes, and thank you. And you just mentioned, Mr. Segal, that it was towards the end of 2015 that you became aware of potential wage theft within the network, and you then conducted some audits yourself. Did you include company-owned stores in that audit of wage compliance?
Senator, thank you for your question. Obviously, and moreover, our own stores we audit on a continual basis. So it was not that we just...
Was it done by the audit done by the same team that did the franchise network?
Yeah, but on top of that, we keep on auditing our own stores on an ongoing basis.
Okay, now, from what I can understand from your submission, you're not closing the door to franchising somewhere down the track. You may decide at some point.
Absolutely.
So it's correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's this transition period from the existing format of the stores to the new super duper convenience store format. It's in that transition period where you see the need for corporate stores, company-owned stores.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, and something that I should have mentioned, thank you very much for triggering my memory. You probably are not aware that besides franchisees, there are about 500 independent distributors or resellers in our language that resell our fuel. The relationship, they employ about 4,000 people, and they do it very much on the basis of us being a good supplier to them and providing the brand. That is continuing. That relationship, which is, again, going to what we do. We do actually do good business with small businesses. We support small businesses, and here specifically 500 of those small businesses who are our resellers, our independent distributors, employing 4,000 people in Australia, and they are doing it based on our support. So that relationship will continue.
Yeah, but there is you might say it's a coincidence of timing here, but on the one hand, you've admitted that there's a need for company-owned stores to move to the new format, and so there's a need to transition out of franchising. Along comes the wage theft accusation, and it would appear to some people, but I'm giving you the opportunity to respond to this, that you've used this wage theft audit and non-compliance there to facilitate at minimal cost to the business a transition to the corporate model which you see as essential for your transition.
Senator, I understand that there could be that understanding. However, this is not the case. I mentioned to you that we've been planning for a new strategy for a long time. That's what Caltex does. You may recall we closed the Colonial Refinery a few years ago. It took us 2 years of studying to come to that conclusion. And we've done exactly the same thing this time. We're not doing things in a rush. When we came to the conclusion that we need to take operational control of our sites, we understood there might be a misunderstanding tying the two together. And we thought maybe we should just wait. But that was the wrong thing. It was the wrong thing for the company to do. And we made a decision to proceed because that's the right thing to do, as compared to doing the easy thing, avoid the misunderstanding, and we don't work like this.
I'm told that the issue of wages and payroll is not something that's subject of the training sessions that you do for new franchisees. Is that correct?
Senator, I think it's important for me to highlight the relationship between Caltex and its franchisees the way it is now according to the franchise agreements. And the important principle is that we both see ourselves as independent business entities, and we treat ourselves as such. Caltex does not have control over everything that is going in a franchise operation. The franchisees have got total control over their operations and financial management. For example, they decide who to employ. They decide of skills those people will have. They decide how to roster them. They decide what items they are going to stock. They decide on the prices. We do provide them with training and refresher training in terms of their obligations and how to deal and comply with the law. We certainly do that. But we do not, as compared to other franchise systems, and they are not all the same, we do not process the profit and loss, we do not process the wages. They are doing it as an independent business entity.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I just put to you a complaint that has been aired on a number of occasions amongst Caltex franchisees, and that is that the Caltex franchise model was manipulated by Caltex to, over several years, to significantly benefit the company that you're representing to the detriment of franchisees.
Senator, I reject that. I reject it totally. Every single change that was ever made to the agreement, to the franchise agreement between Caltex and its franchisee has been done in absolute and total cooperation with the Franchise Council. And every single...
If that is the case, Mr. Segal, and these complaints continue to be aired, that takes us to the Franchise Council and its role, and the issue of power differential between the negotiating entities of the franchisees as opposed to you as the franchisor and the supplier of the key product. Is there a power imbalance, Mr. Segal, that's allowed this allegation to be put so forcefully in public on so many occasions? What's wrong with what's going on there?
So I would assert again there is nothing wrong with the Caltex business model. I'll remind...
No, with the agreements that are being made.
So the agreements are made absolutely crystal clear to every franchisee.
Do they have
There's a disclosure
sufficient power
statement.
to reject them?
Sorry?
Do they have sufficient power to reject them, or is there something wrong with that negotiation process, Mr.
So
Segal?
I can't see what's wrong, because if a franchisee comes to Caltex, we go through the agreement. There is disclosure declaration that clearly spells out every single aspect of that agreement so that the franchisee doesn't have to accept it. Moreover, we are advising every franchisee to take independent legal advice, independent financial advice. We don't sign the agreement on the spot. We tell them, please go and take some days to think about it. And even if they come back and they say we want to sign, we give them 7 days cooling period. So I think we've been also always extremely straightforward and extremely transparent in terms of those agreements.
Thank you for putting your view. Clearly, there's a disagreement of perspective
May
here.
I add one comment?
Yes.
And the comment is, those issues were never raised before us taking action against franchisees that seriously breach the agreement.
And that takes me to my last question, because we've just gone over time. You make 2 recommendations with regard to changes that you think should be implemented in the oil code.
Yes.
I want to just give you the chance to speak about those.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it.
Yep.
It starts with the point that I made, the question that I made, I put, should the franchisee be seen as independent business entities that make decisions about that operations and financial issues? Or is the franchisor expected to govern most of the aspects? That's the question that I'm putting. If it's the first, the former, then the franchisees need to be held accountable and responsible for the way they run the business. If it is the latter, and that is the franchisor is expected to govern this, then the franchisor needs to be given the authority to police it. And what I mean by that, the authority to actually audit. We, when we started the process audit, faced tremendous objection to the audit being done. It was very, very difficult. Franchisees simply refused to let us audit their sites. So we need to have the power to do that. We need to have the power to screen assignments, for example. We need to have the power to terminate without having to go through a very painful process that takes time. And during that time, of course, vulnerable workers are still being underpaid. The question that I ask, if the franchisor is held responsible, for example, for payment, what's the implication of that? The implication of that is the franchisor will have to actually run the payment system. The franchisor will have to make sure the money actually is given to the employee. And as importantly as we found out, I have to still go to the employee and check if he's not being asked or she being asked to give the money back, half the money back to the franchisee. If you look at the complication brought about by such an approach, I find it difficult to see how the franchise system is going to create value, because the costs imposed on the system are going to be greater than running the operations ourselves. I think there's another recommendation, if I may.
Yes.
And one of the things I mentioned is the importance of whistleblowers.
Yes.
That was extremely helpful to us. The current legislation, as far as I understand, does not offer enough protection to franchisee whistleblowers. I think there is protection for whistleblowers coming within the franchisor, for example, but I think there is scope to improve the protection for this.
So does this committee, Mr. Segal. We've got a report with the government. We're waiting for a response. It was a unanimous report on whistleblowing and the need for change and improvements.
Thank you very much.
Senator Ketter has a final question.
I just want to follow up on a question I asked you earlier. Mr. Segal, did I understand you correctly to say that you accept that you did not do any training in regard to payroll for new franchisees? Is that correct?
Well, what I'm saying is we do HR training, but what I'm saying is we are not doing, so let me be very clear. We are doing very clear training in terms of making the franchisee aware and familiar with the law that dictates the payment and all the other benefits that an employee should have. There's no question about it. What we don't do, we don't run the payroll system, and therefore I can't trade them on a system that we don't run.
I'm talking about leading up to the finding of the wage theft. I understand that Clause 6 of the STAR franchise agreement provides an obligation on you to provide training to franchisees in regard to payroll, and that wasn't happening. That's in the ACA lawyer's submission.
So we provided training as per our obligation in the franchise agreement, absolutely. What I cannot provide, because we do not, as compared to other franchisors who run the payroll for the franchisees, we don't do that, and therefore I cannot train them in a particular system because each of them might have their own.
Can I ask, the 27% of franchisees that have not yet settled, when do you expect those settlements to complete?
I would expect that by the end of the year, maybe first quarter next year.
Thank you. And in terms of the underpayment of wages, you set up a contingency fund of, was it 20 million?
20 million, yes.
And how many employees are yet to receive their correct wage payments?
We received, I think, 246 or 249 claims. We approved most of them, maybe 3 of them are still pending, and I think they're about, we approved all of those, and I think there's about another 50 that are undergoing a process.
Is there a time limit on this? Are there still claims you expect to be proffered?
So what we are doing, Senator, is every site that we audit, we make sure to the extent that we can that we advertise the fact, that we are seeking input, that we are looking for people that have been underpaid. We even are looking for telephone numbers and we send texts, so we are using any type of possible communication to get people to put their hand up. As I mentioned to you, over the last couple of months we had no breaches, but we are determined to do every single site, and there might be a few that we don't know about.
How many people have you repaid funds to who don't live in Australia?
Let me give you the number. Just a moment. Can I take this on notice and
I
come
think
back
that
to you?
might be
Thank you.
helpful in the interests of time. So my question is, how many people in total have received repayments? And if you could provide a schedule of that?
So total about 250.
250
Yeah.
people?
So
And the amounts for each of
The range
those?
was, the highest, the average was about 20,000, the highest was about 92,000, the lowest was about $800.
Right, and how many of them were Australian residents? How many of them were overseas students? And how many of them are offshore payments to people in other countries?
May I come back to you
Yes,
on that?
please. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us
you.
today.
Thank
We will have some questions on notice, and I ask if you could return them to the Secretariat by the 5th of October.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr
Thank you,
Segal.
Di.
Thank you, Mr
Thank
Gregg.
you very much.
Thanks.
I now call our next witnesses from 7-Eleven.